No.
No. Okay.
But if you're stuck on any of them, you can email me and I'll respond
No, I
tomorrow.
just didn't know because there wasn't a schedule up, so I wasn't sure if we were right into chapter 5 or.
Oh, it's on your syllabus, the schedule.
Oh, duh.
You're right, the modified schedule that I made was just till the end of this unit. But now we're back to what's on the syllabus. It's a good question.
Crossed my mind to go look at this.
So your schedule's on there. So there's a lot of people who brought their grade up last semester by 30 points on their next exam. So it's definitely possible. What do you think people who are struggling maybe did for the second test they didn't do for the first one? Well, study more, but also, did you talk about anything that might make your study more effective? Study throughout the week. Don't wait till the last minute.
I think really looking at your slides and your study guide is really, really helpful because it stopped, like me, I was trying to ingest too much in the beginning.
Yeah.
And really breaking, and just only paying attention to what you and really sticking to that helps so much.
Yeah, so definitely stick to, what's on the slides, what we do in class. Because I'm talking about it because that's what I think you should know for those chapters. And the other big thing is to actually really, really know those bold things before class. Because I don't know if you've noticed, maybe the days where you didn't have time to get ready before class, maybe you seemed a little lost during class. And then the days where you're able to study, it's like, wow, this seems kind of easy. That's because if you know the easy stuff, then when we're in here, you can work on the hard stuff. The second main thing is to really, really try and work in your groups or in pairs on those assignments and not just wait for answers. Even if you feel totally lost, just whatever's in your head, you just have to say it. That's the best way for you to actually kind of learn those things. Because science isn't just about you memorizing stuff that I tell you. That's only going to take you so far, and that's definitely not getting you through all your higher level nursing, whatever PA, whichever programs you're going into. You will actually have to be able to think on your own. So that's what we're training you to do. But don't get discouraged, and office hours, no one ever comes, at least for the first unit. So I'm always there to answer anything you're stuck on. And I'm not that scary, I promise. Yeah.
So for this chapter, it seemed like a lot of it wasn't very in-depth.
Mm-hmm.
Was that just kind of because of the chapter that it was, and the other ones that you're going to have to know more in-depth what's in the book, or?
So basically the way I look at it is I try to pick out just 3 or 4 things to go in depth on, and then the other parts just keep it kind of brief.
General idea.
Just general ideas. I find that works a little bit better. And so you'll kind of be able to tell in there, like, if it says contrast or explain, describe the functions. I would say this chapter is reasonably straightforward, probably more straightforward than chapter 3 was, for example, with those simple diffusion. We don't have time today to look at exam questions, but I did write down some I want to go over with y'all. But we'll do that on Monday after the practical. And also, there's a few people, at least one person still needs to take this test. So probably wouldn't be good to go over questions. Wouldn't be very fair. All right, so anyways, chapter 5. I would tell you your average was 7 points higher than last semester. So we had an average of 61 the first test last semester. So 66, we can get it up, 10, 12 points the next test. That puts our average up at an 80, which is really good. All right, so chapter 5, questions. Yes?
Okay, so you have, on letter B, you have the 4 layers of the epidermis, but then on G, you have 5 layers.
Yeah, so I meant to write thin skin on B there.
Okay.
So thick skin has that extra layer, which you'll see. What else? So 4 functions of hair. Look great. No, that's not one. So it provides you some warmth, sensation. Reading one. Protection from either microbes or from the sun. So I should say those are 2 separate ones. So protection from microbes or dust getting into your eyes, for example, and then protection from the sun, which is really only for your head on your hair on your head. The sun. Do you like how there was a section on body piercings in that chapter?
Yeah.
Like, in case you didn't know, body piercings is when you pierce something through your skin. Yes?
Can you define D?
I didn't hear what you said.
Can you define D?
D. So the corpuscles of touch, they're just a specialized nerve ending that's in the epidermis.
The book refers to it as the mind. Which do we use it as?
That's just 2 different names for it.
Which one will you be using?
The one on the study guide. So it's a touch receptor, basically. Nerve ending for touch. The definition? Or the other thing? Oh, yeah. So the 4 cell types in your epidermis and their functions. The first one is the keratinocyte, and its job is to make keratin. The melanocyte, its job is to make melanin. Macrophages are defense against pathogens, and tactile epithelial cells are nerve receptors for touch. Alrighty, you're all good. Go. All right, so which cell type produces keratin? It's the keratinocytes. Hope you got that one right. Which is not a layer of the epidermis? Spinosum, corneum, basal, or papillary? It's the papillary. That's part of the dermis, the papillary. And which of the following contains cells that produce new nail cells? Nail body, nail root, nail matrix. It is the matrix, nail matrix. And what is lanugo? Layer of the dermis, type of nerve cell, fine hair found in infants, cell type in the epidermis. It's the hair on infants, exactly. So if they're premature, but then also, I think like 10% of the time, just the full-term babies born with lanugo, just like our baby. It's kind of funny looking, like this little hairy infant. I know. And the main reason behind different skin colors, different amounts of keratin, melanin, hair follicles, or connective cells. So it's the melanin, exactly. All right. And remember, these all together, they count as one exam grade. So if you can get some 5s, some 4s, that can really help your grade there. And I dropped the lowest 3 too. So even if you have missed a day or 2, or you get a 1 or a 2 on one, that gets dropped. So for people who are here every day and never miss a day, they almost always end up above 80% on those. Because some are easier than others. I don't know. All right, so chapter 5 is where we start looking at organ systems altogether. So we talked about cells, we talked about tissues, and now is the actual organ systems. And we start off with probably the one that's the simplest, the skin. Of course, the skin is the largest organ in your body. Probably heard that before. And maybe when you were in middle school, you'd tell each other that your epidermis is showing. No?
Yeah.
I guess I was the only cool kid that did that. Yeah. See, I'm not the only one. All right, so we got 3 main layers, moving from superficial to deep. Remember those terms? So epidermis is from outside, then dermis, and then we have the subcutaneous layer underneath the dermis. And we're really only going to talk about those first two, epidermis and dermis. All right, so what does the epidermis do? Protects you from abrasion, chemicals, microbes, heat. It does sensations, so it has nerve endings, excretion, so sweat, a little bit of urea secreted through the skin, and synthesis of vitamin D happens at the epidermis. So in order for vitamin D to get activated, it needs to be exposed to UV rays. Any guesses how much time in the sun you need on average to get enough vitamin D per day? Yeah, so it's like 15 minutes. It's not that much. Probably in the dead of winter here, maybe you need more because the sun's not as strong. And in the middle of summer, probably need like 5 minutes. But it's less than you might think. It's not like you have to be out there for an hour every day. Does anybody know what the disorder is from not being in the sun and being depressed? Have you heard of it? It is the best acronym ever. So the acronym is SAD, and it's Seasonal Affective Disorder, or SAD. Common in places where it's like in Alaska, where it's dark for 3 or 4 months and you don't get any vitamin D. All right, so we've got our cell types. We already talked about them: keratinocyte, melanocyte, macrophage, and the tactile cells, which are basically neurons or nerve endings. And keratin, this is a tough fibrous protein that provides protection. So the vast majority of your epidermis is made of the keratinocytes. Like, 95, 97% of the cells are those kind of cells. Melanocytes make the melanin. Does anybody know what melanin does for you? Yeah, so it kind of absorbs the UV rays before they can damage the DNA of the cells deeper. Macrophages, and then of course, function, the sensation of touch for those tactile cells. Yeah, so albinism is you still have these cells, but they don't produce the melanin that they're supposed to. It's just a mutation in one gene that causes it. And of course, melanin's in your hair as well. So, do it? Yeah, so like the cells that make those few little hairs don't make melanin for some reason. All right, and we've got 4 layers of the epidermis in thin skin, 5 in thick, and in order from deep to superficial. So you remember deep is like deeper in the body, superficial is closer to the surface. So it goes stratum basal, stratum spinosum, stratum granulosum, and then if you're in thick skin, you have the stratum lucidum, And then all of them have the stratum corneum on the outside. We'll talk a little bit about each of those. And we'll look at some pictures too. So the stratum basal, that's the deepest layer of the epidermis. And what's different about this one is it's made of cuboidal cells. So it's not like the stratified squamous of the top part. It's just one layer of cuboidal cells. And there's different kinds in there, keratinocytes, melanocytes, tactile cells, and important, this is where the actual stem cells are that are going to replace the worn out cells that slough off of the outside. All right, and then as we go a little bit more superficial, the next layer is spinosum, and it's got several layers of keratinocytes that are polygonal, so they're not cuboidal anymore, they're not squamous yet, they're like halfway there. Would it help if I turn one of these lights off a little bit? I feel like you can't see them very well. So your basal layers right here, these one layer of cube cells, and then the spinosum layers right here. Under this dark red layer is the spinosum. So you can kind of see that they're not cubes, they're sort of polygons. I know polygon's not very specific, but it can be sort of any kind of polygon-y shape depending on the cell. And then the granulosum has 3 to 5 layers of keratinocytes. And this is where they start making lots and lots of keratin. And the reason it's so dark here is because keratin stains really well when you stain the skin. So you see this really dark layer because those are completely packed full of keratin there. And then in thick skin, you have this extra layer. It's just 2 to 3 cells thick, called stratum lucidum. And one way to think about thick skin, it's anywhere no person ever has hair. That's where thick skin is. So soles, palms, not many other places. So your face, for example, is not thick skin. It's thin skin because it has hair on it. Or at least it can. And then our last layer, you could tell from here that it's like the thickest layer. So it's everything above here. And it's 23 layers of dead keratinocytes. So they basically, as they move outwards, they fill up with keratin until they die. And then they're just sitting on top of here. So you may not have known that, but most of those, if you look at your skin, you're basically looking at dead cells that are just waiting to be sloughed off or scraped off. All right, so with your groups, we'll have a little group contest here. We're going to see who can come up with the best mnemonic device. So this is a sentence where the first letter of each word starts with those letters. That's our layers of the epidermis. You are going to share it, so profanity is not allowed. So BSGLC. What can you come up with? Just take 2 minutes. Being sad gets you lots of cats. That's mean for the cat people out there. All right, first clicker question. Which of the following describes the stratum corneum? All right. So what is E there? All right. It's the dead cells filled with keratin. What about the stratum granulosum? All right. So granules with keratin precursors. If you notice, the name tells you what it is right away, right? Which layer is actively dividing, do you think? Which one was it? Yeah, all right. It's the basal layer. Nice. And I just wanted to show you a slightly different stained picture. If you notice, this has the lucidum. So this is what the thick skin looks like. And so you could see how much thicker that corneum is. So it's like if you took a little section of your foot or palm of your hand. That's what it would look like. So corneum, there's that extra layer, granulosum, spinosum, and then that single basal layer there. And what we're about to get into, this yellow here, that's the dermis pushing up, which we're going to get into in a little bit.
And that's all still epithelial.
Mm-hmm. Everything in red up there is epithelial tissue.
So the dermis is
Right. Which we'll get to. So yeah, good point. The epidermis is epithelial tissue. A few different shapes of cells, right? There was the cubes, the polygons, and then the squamous as you got farther up there. And of course, we'll look at all these under the microscope. But I think not Monday. I think it's the next Monday because we have the practical. All right, so just a quick little movie for you to see where these cells come from. We'll start right here. And so this is always constantly happening. Those stem cells in the basal layer are dividing, and when they divide, they push the cells above them up. So you've got to constantly replace those cells that are, so when they get up to here, they fly off as dust. But not a big deal, because you've always got cells pushing up from below.
Are there any disorders or anything that, like, people's skin doesn't regenerate?
That's true. That was a funny one. So as you age, though, that process slows down and your skin gets thinner. So that's why when you in your 80s, 90s, like you get, well, yeah, you're cold, but you get scratched so easily, and like, you know, just like something that would not do anything to us would give them like a gash, you know. Yeah. I don't know. It probably depends on the location. I've never heard a number for that, but I'm guessing it's.
Probably most of it.
I mean, like in this room, it's probably mostly.
Probably a disturbing amount.
A little bit of dissected cat and rat stuff, and then a bunch of skin cells.
Probably a number that you don't want to know is what I would guess.
Right. So they're always being pushed up from below. All right, types of skin. Kind of touched on already. Basically, thick skin is palms and the soles of your feet. Thin skin is everywhere else. Thick skin, no hair, 5 layers. It does have ridges, which are your fingerprints. So if you look at those ridges in your fingers. And your palms, they have fewer sensory receptors. Thin skin, hair, 4 layers, no ridges, and more sensory receptors. All right, so why do you think, what's different about thick skin that makes it thicker? All right, so why don't you talk to your group? I'll tell you that A is not correct. So if it's not A, what is it? Which layer is it? Well, the lucidum is the layer it has that the thin skin doesn't. The corneum is the one that's thicker, way, way thicker. And I put this one on here because it would make sense. It has an extra layer. That must be why it's thicker, right? But that lucidum layer, if you remember, it's only like 2 cells thick. So really it's just, it helps it be a little stronger. It's got,
All those extra layers.
yeah, it's got a little more connective tissue in it than the other ones. Right. Any epidermis questions? So the next layer, as you get deeper, is the dermis. And this one is actually connective tissue. So we're kind of moving into a totally different type of tissue. What does the dermis do? It also has nerve endings to sense sensations. Another function of it is temperature regulation. So all those blood vessels that are in the dermis there, if you're hot, they dilate and open up more so that your blood's closer to the surface and your blood cools down. When you're cold, they do the opposite. The blood vessels in the dermis constrict. Your body keeps the blood more at your core where it can, so it doesn't lose heat by being close to the surface of the skin. And actually 10% of your blood is in your dermis at all times. It's kind of a high amount, if you think about it. Secretion, so sweat, once again. And kind of a unique function of the dermis compared to the epidermis. Because it's connective, it's full of collagen, elastin, all those connective tissue types we talked about. Because our skin, obviously it's really strong, right? You could pull on it, it doesn't come off. It can stretch, go back to its normal shape. So really structurally strong. That all comes from the dermis. So you attach your epidermis to the dermis, you're getting your strength from there. And for our dermis, we've only got 2 layers, papillary and reticular. The papillary is closer to the dermis, and the reticular is deeper, so below the papillary region. And you can see that in this picture. Way up there's the epidermis. And then kind of the lighter spot here is the papillary region. And then everything down here is the reticular layer of the dermis. Which ones takes up more space? So the reticular is a much thicker layer than the papillary layer. So most of your dermis is reticular layer. What are they made of? The papillary region, thin collagen, fine elastic, blood vessels, nerve cells. The reticular region is those thick collagen fibers. So this is where you get a lot of the elasticity and some strength from being torn apart. But the reticular region is where you get most of the strength that the skin has. And of course, it is connective tissue, so it's mostly extracellular matrix with some scattered fibroblasts around that make the matrix. Just like y'all told me on the test. Right. All right, so let's go over those functions. What'd y'all say for temperature regulation? It is dermis only. And that's because the only part of it that can change how much temperature or how much heat you're losing is the blood vessels in the dermis. By, having more or less blood in the dermis area. So the keyword there is the regulation. If we just said like prevent heat loss or something, which is probably what you were thinking, is probably both. But regulation, which is what we really care about, right? Because it can change how much blood's up close to the surface. Prevent water loss. That's epidermis. Sensory perception. That's both. Vitamin D. Epidermis. Protection from microbes. I'd probably accept epidermis or both. Well, since the dermis has blood vessels, that means it has white blood cells in the blood too. I'd probably say epidermis is a better answer, but if you did put both, you would technically be right. UV, that's the epidermis, and secretion of oil and sweat. So that's kind of a confusing one as well, because you make the oil and the sweat in the dermis, but then it has to go through the epidermis to come out. So I think you probably have to say both. If you only said dermis, I certainly understand why you would say that. But I probably won't, put that one on the test because it's such a gray area. All right, some work. So talk a little bit about hair and glands before we get to the end. So if you take a cross section of the whole skin, first one thing to remember, look how thin the epidermis is up here. And then this whole dermis is full of all kinds of stuff. So you've got your blood vessels. Here's a hair bulb. We've got a sweat gland, an oil gland, different kind of sweat gland. And obviously, is that thin or thick skin then?
Thin, because it has hair.
It has hair on it, so it's thin skin. So that's kind of the trick, I think. All right, so let's zoom in on the hair a little bit. So we zoomed way into the hair follicle. And the way your hair grows is kind of interesting. So the cells down here divide, and they're added to the hair root, which is right there. And as they get pushed up, they make more keratin, and they die. To the point where when you're looking up at the hair close to the surface, it doesn't look like cells anymore. It's just keratin with melanin in it for color. There's some subtypes. Melanin's the major one, but there are a few other that give you some different colors. Because you can, as you look around, it's not like it's just different shades of brown that you have, right? Like some people have a little more red in their hair, or a little more black. So there are a few other pigments that are in there. So what about our different glands? First off is the oil glands. And for the most part, those just secrete oils onto the hair themselves or right next to the hair. And that keeps the hair pliable and prevents water from evaporating because water can't get through oil. So if you have kind of a thin layer of oil there, the water doesn't leave as quickly. eccrine sweat glands, you have these more or less all over your body, and they're for temperature regulation. So you have these from when you're little. The apocrine sweat glands, these don't develop till puberty, or at least they don't start secreting. So mostly any place that makes body odor is where those apocrine glands are. Any guesses why you have those?
For pheromones.
Well, there's no proof that we actually have pheromones, but I think the idea is, think way back evolution, maybe that body odor used to be attractive. No deodorant, no bathing.
Sick. Do you ever watch old cowboy movies and wonder how bad everybody smelled back then? Because I do.
Yeah, or any of those medieval movies.
I really think about that. It's gross.
Yeah. Otherwise, why would we have them? Just saying. There's no other reason for it.
Oh yeah, well think about animals. They pee all over themselves to attract male elk. Bull elk.
Yeah, that's true.
No, I mean I have because my husband hunts all the time and I've smelled it and it's disgusting. But they pee all over themselves to attract females. It's awesome.
All right, and our last gland is only in the ear, so that's the ceremonious, and it makes your earwax. It's a special earwax gland. All right, so number 3 there. Which layer got the best nutrition? The basal, and why is that? It's closest to the connective tissue, which has blood vessels in it. And then, of course, the corneum's the farthest away. And in fact, that's probably a big part of why those cells start dying as they get farther away, because they're not getting any nutrients. It's not like they're doing apoptosis. It's just more no nutrients, now you're dead. And then number 4 there, explain how the structure of the dermis supports the function. So if you chose temperature regulation, it would be that the dermis has lots of blood vessels that can constrict. If you chose that's funny. So I guess 2 doesn't have structural strength at all. But what gives the dermis all that structural strength that it needs? Yeah, so having lots of collagen helps the dermis keep its, provide that structure and prevent the skin from just falling off when you pull on it. I was just talking about some of the functions of the dermis before. And if you did secretion of oil and sweat and said it's because they have sweat glands in there, that'd be true too. So lots of different ways to answer that one. All right, so the last thing we're going to do for today is wound healing. And we have 2 different types of wounds that you can get in the skin. One kind is you only lose cells of the epidermis. And then the second is if you go through the epidermis and damage the dermis. So we call the first kind epidermal wound healing. So this is the kind of wound that you probably don't even notice you have. So a scratch that doesn't bleed, doesn't get red. How often do you notice something like that? Pretty rarely. And obviously these are super common and it's very easy to fix. So you just take your basal cell layer, they migrate over, divide and push up slowly, and then you have all your layers are rebuilt from the bottom up. And if you notice, no bleeding involved, Just cells move over, divide and reproduce up to the top. So pretty simple. No inflammation, no redness. What about if you get a deep wound? And of course, we're only saying deep wound in the context of epidermal. This would still just be like if you got a scratch and it bled a tiny bit. That would still count as a deep wound because it gets to the dermis. So you get the blood, you get the blood clot. First two steps. The blood vessels regrow, scar tissue forms, and then eventually the epithelium or the basal cells will come over and regenerate, just like in epidermal wound healing. And there's your scab there. And of course, depending on how bad that wound was, maybe this epidermis that reformed wasn't able to reform completely around it, and you were left with some of the scar tissue showing, which is where you get those scars from. All right, so which of these occurs in deep wound healing, but not epidermal wound healing? People are here. Anybody else? There are 22 people in here, right? Not crazy. All right, so the answer is either A, B, and D. C, that happens in both kinds of wound healing. That the keratinocytes move upward from the basal to replace the lost cells. That would happen in both. All right, so we'll do these last few next time. There's not too many, just a few questions.